This webcast is going to look at Custom XSLT mapping in BizTalk Server 2006. It's going to be a level 300 webcast, so it is quite challenging. We're doing some pretty advanced stuff working with a mapper and with a Custom XSLT, so it's good if you've got a grasp of how the mapper works. So what we're going to look at is some of the problems that you may encounter when you're developing complex maps in BizTalk Server. Look at replacing the mapper's functionality with Custom XSLT, and then also look at a more real-world scenario, looking at using Custom XSLT for mapping EDI documents. Okay, so I've got a basic Visual Studio project here, a basic BizTalk project with a few artifacts in it, and I'm going to look at some of the actual examples that we're dealing with. So the first one that I'm going to look at is mapping a complex source to a simple target, and I've basically created the map file for this and set it to use a test input document, but I haven't actually implemented any of the functionality of the map. What we can do is go in and look at the complex source XML that I'm using, and you can see we've got some repeating data here, these items coming in. We've got last name, first name, telephone number and email address here. So I've already configured this map to take in this actual input instance document. So what I'm going to do is to right click on this and do a quick test map, and we can see we're getting the result that we require, and that's coming out all well and good. So some scenarios you may find that as you're working with very complex maps, you start to build up loads and loads of these types of structures and repeating structures. Worst case scenario, you can end up with something that looks like this. If you search for a complex BizTalk map, this is one of the images that pops up in the search engines, and you can find yourself working in these types of scenarios, and it can be much better to use Custom XSLT in these types of scenarios. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy the name of this map, and I'm going to add another map to my BizTalk project. So I'm going to go add new item, choose this as being a map file. This has been a complex source to simple target. This time I'm going to add Custom XSLT onto the map, just indicating that it will be a Custom XSLT map here. And I'm going to select the same two schemas that I was working with before. So we're going to take the complex source, and we're going to take the simple target schema. Just expand these tree nodes here. I'm going to hide the toolbox there, give us a bit more space. We're not going to be using that, we're not going to be working with any functoids in this example. So, top tip, when you are generating these Custom XSLT maps, you need a Custom XSLT file to start with. So what I typically do is just generate just a single link on here. Here I'm mapping value across to first name. I then right click on my map and I take the validate map option, and what this will do is it will verify that my map is successful. It's giving me a couple of warnings because last name and email do not have incoming links, but more importantly it will create an XSL file for us that represents the actual transformation that is taking place here. So another top tip, what I do here is I'm going to select that file, I'm going to hold down the control key, do control C to copy that path, control O, open a new file, Control V to paste in that path to the file, and that's going to open my XSLT file in Visual Studio. And I'm going to do a quick file save as, and I'm going to drop this down into the same project that I'm working in. So it's webcasts, Custom XSLT mapping, and the Custom XSLT mapping project. So it's going to be saved down there. Now what I'm going to have to do is include this in my project. So I'm going to right click that XSL and take including project, and this means it will get checked into source safe and it is part of the project. Okay, going back to my map, I'm actually going to delete that link. We're not going to be using any of the mapper's functionality for this, and what I'm going to do is to click on the mapper background, and I'm going to tell the map that instead of using its mapper's functionality, we're going to be using Custom XSLT that we're going to hand write ourselves. Clicking on the Custom XSLT path, I'm going to drop down into this folder here, into Custom XSLT mapping, and just select that XSL file and click OK. So we've now got this XSL taking place instead of the mapper's functionality. So what I do when I'm in a scenario with this, I drop down this and generate a splitter window. What I want to see is the actual map that I'm focusing on in the top window there, and be able to focus on working with my XSL in the bottom window there. Now Now what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to stick a breakpoint on this query here, because we're actually selecting the value from that item, but because we've got repeating items, we need to actually limit this query to where the actual code is equal to first name to go across to the first name section. I'm then going to take XML in Visual Studio and click on Debug XSLT. So very much like when you test a map, if you're going to be debugging XSLT, we need to supply an input instance of the XML document that's going to come into the map. So what I'm going to do is to go down into my test folder here, where I've got my complex source out.xml, and just click on open. Now we've actually hit this breakpoint and we are producing the XML output here. We're just ready to generate the first name, and this is a query that I put in here, so I can actually copy this query and I'm going to paste it into the watch window there. And you can see that this has got 4 items that it is returning from the document. We've got the first name, the last name, the telephone number and the email address. So we want to limit this query somehow to only return the first name. So what I'm going to do is go in here and modify this, and I'm going to put in that we're going to select where the code is equal to first name. And now we've got an XPath query that is actually selecting the first name of being John and returning that. So what I'm going to do is just copy this query. I'm going to stop the debugging, and I'm going to paste this query, and I can remove my breakpoint and actually paste in the query there. So that's going to get my first name. Now generating the other sections of the actual document here, what I'm going to do now is click on the open here. And you can see that second really cool feature about Visual Studio 2005, we have IntelliSense in here, not only for all of the XSL commands, so you can learn a bit about XSLT, but we've also got it for the actual items in the target scheme. We know that we've got last name, which is going to be generated here. And another cool feature about working with Custom XSLT, in the mapper you cannot copy paste the actual queries here, but because we're working with a plain text XSLT, I can drop in this and just change this to last name. And lastly, we need the email address, and I can just drop this in and set this to be email. And save this. So I could go in and debug this, but what I'm going to do is just take my Custom XSLT map, which is this one here. I'm going to right click on this map, which has no functionality implemented, and just take the test map option there. Right. So we got that functionality implemented there. There's a couple of things I really like about Custom XSLT. The first one is that when we look at this XSLT file, this does look a lot simpler and it's easier to maintain than a complex map. We can also copy paste the values here, so it's very easy to actually build up these if you're doing a lot of repetitive selections, which you are very, very often doing when you're working with maps. And thirdly, it's also more efficient. If I go back to my regular map and do a validate map here, we're actually going to look at the XSLT that the mapping compiler generated. So this is the XSL file that BizTalk generated. And you can see there's all kinds of variables in here. They're doing loads of selections. And then down here they've got some C#, which has been injected here for the logical existence functoid. That's for the equals functoid. And these various is numeric functoids. In extreme cases, I've seen handwritten XML be about 5% the size of the BizTalk generated XSLT. So that's sort of a code saving of about 20 times when you're actually writing this, and it is going to run more efficiently. And you've got the power of being able to go and debug through this. Okay, so let's look at a more real-world example. Mapping EDI documents is pretty complex. I'm just going to do a expand schema node on this EDI schema. This is an Edifac D96A invoice schema here. And running down the schema, you can see the amount of nodes that we've got to think about when we're doing the mapping. It is a very complex structure and quite hard to understand what's going on here. What I want to do is to bring this into my internal invoice schema, and I've just basically done something really simple here with just a few values here that I can extract. Just to give you an idea on how to get started with building an EDI map using Custom XSLT. So we're going to need an input document. I've set up a very basic channel here using an actual receive port that is using the EDI receive pipeline. So I'm going to send in one of these EDI documents that basically looks something like this. If I stick it on the word wrap, you'll see sort of the actual structure of that EDI document. And I'm going to do a copy paste of this document. Another top tip, if you set the receive URI on a receive location to something like copystar.txt or copystar.xml, you can just work in one folder when you're testing your message channels. So that's brought out my XML for the EDI structure here, and it's got us some of the way there. We've actually got our data from that sort of nasty EDI format across into XML that we can actually work with. But it's a long way from the actual structure that we need when we're actually going to sort of map this internally with the sort of internal documents, my internal invoice for example. So what I'm going to do is to generate a map which uses this. I'm going to drop on a new map here, which is going to be D96I to internal invoice. Okay, that. So I'm going to set the schemas for this. This one is going to be the Edifact schema. This one is going to be the internal invoice schema here. I'm going to expand the tree node on this, but I'm not going to do this on the EDI. You can basically see how complex this is going to get. So what I'm going to do is just see if I can generate a quick link here and do a validate map to actually generate a starting XSL document for me. Control C, Control O, Control V, bring this into Studio, and a quick save as. And drop this down into my project directory, which is webcasts, Custom XSLT mapping, Custom XSLT mapping, and leave it with the same name as the actual map name. I can then go in here, include it into the project, go back to my map, delete this link, and then select on the background that we're actually going to use that custom XSL file. So custom XSLT path is going to be this XSL file there. So typically what I have is the Edifact XML representation here in the top window, and I'm going to do Control KD just to format this. I also have my map up here, so I can actually test this. I'll actually look through and see what's happening in the map, and also my XSL in the bottom window here. I'm going to try expanding this and see if this gives us a bit more space. So what's going on here is we are generating the internal invoice here, and I'm going to actually delete this link that we generated there and start actually building up my structure. So we're going to have the header structure here, and then we need to have the doc date and then the actual order date. Now, sorry, it should be XSL value of, and then we take the select. You can see I'm pretty rusty with the XSL commands, but the IntelliSense provides you great help here. So what I need to do is to put some type of text in there to actually get the query out, and then I'm going to stick a debug breakpoint on that, and I'm going to run this in the debugger and see if I can actually locate the value that I want to extract here. So I'm going to take Debug XSLT, and I'm going to supply my sample instance, which is going to be the test EDI invoice, and we're going to whack through and hit that breakpoint now. Looking at the test invoice XML, we need to go down in the various structures here, and we need to pull out the actual date value. I think document date is going to be this date here when this value is equal to 35, and I think we were substituting the namespace here. We were representing it slightly differently. So S0 is equal to the BizTalk Edifact namespace here. So I'm in the actual root node here, S0 Edifact doc invoice, and we can drill in here and basically see all of the various child nodes. So what I want is the S0 DTM node here to start off with. So I can drop this in the watch window. And you can see that we've pulled back two DTM values here, and you can actually drill in and see what they are. I'm not sure if I'm getting this right with the actual codes here. You can see that I've got the NS0C507 here, and then I've got these various values, the C50701 and C50702. So what I'm going to do, I'm probably getting this wrong, so don't bother emailing me if you're an EDI expert and I'm choosing the wrong values here. I'm actually going to choose this where the actual identifier here is 35 and stick this in as the document date. So going back to my query here and back to the XSL I'm debugging here, I've got the DTM value, and then I'm going to be taking the S0, which is the namespace I'm using internally in the map, C507. So we've still got two nodes here, node 1 and node 2. And what I'm going to want to do is to put in a sort of a selection clause here, and it's going to be where the C50701 is equal to 35. So we're now just bringing back one of these items here, and what I need to pull off is the C50702 value from that node. And then the text value from there. And that's bringing back my date. So I'm going to copy this query, stop the debugger, and whack that into the query there. So with this query here in the document date, what I'm going to do is just test my map against the input instance just to see if I'm going down the right path here. So right clicking and doing a quick test map. We get this dialog box page. Even though I'm taking XML as the instance, it's asking me about the character encoding, and just click on OK here. We're getting an error because obviously we're not formatting the correct, we haven't got a valid map output here. If we go in here, I have got the doc date of 206/02/28, which has been extracted from that map there. Now it takes a while to sort of crack getting these queries right when you're working with Custom XSLT, but the great thing about this is once you've got one of these queries done, it's fairly straightforward to actually run through your document and start building up the other queries. So now I'm going to build up the order date here, and I'm just going to copy this guy, paste this in here. It's going to be almost exactly the same query for the order date. Again, please don't email me if I'm getting all these wrong. This probably isn't the correct qualifiers here. I'm going to stick in at 137 there. Save this. I'm going to run another quick test map on this. So these two seem to be coming through fine. I'm actually going to pause the video for a bit. It is quite time consuming building in these actual paths here, especially when you've got a screen resolution like mine. Everything gets cramped up, so I'm going to pause it for a bit, just add on some more links, and then I'll drop back to that and show you the map when it is a bit more completed. Okay, so what I've got here is I've added a bit more functionality to the XSLT file here. So what I've added in is selecting the supplier name and the purchaser name. And this is where the queries do start to get a bit complex. I'm going into the name and address loop here, and they've got codes for supplier and buyer here. So what I'm doing is just locate this. So this is the actual buyer. So you can see this is a NAD loop. NAD stands for name and address. So this is where the NAD01 is equal to BY, which I'm selecting here. Then going into the CTA loop, and just basically bringing out the name of John Callaway here. So you can see I'm basically drilling down into that structure. It took me a couple of minutes to get this right, probably more than a couple of minutes if I'm honest, to actually get this query right. But once you have that query, it is a case of just copy pasting it and just changing SU to BY to get the supplier instead of the buyer. We used this in a real world project, and we went from a map that contains 600 functoids and various links and so on to a map that just contained 100 of these like XSLT queries. And once you get into the hang of it, it's very easy to actually copy paste and modify. Just make sure you've got some good testing on there to actually validate that all the documents are coming through correctly. Another thing you need to be aware about is that the XSLT debugging is your friend, so use it, utilize it in Visual Studio. You can see I've put in quite a complex query here that's bringing back Alan Smith, and if I change SU here from the supplier to BY for the buyer, we get the name of John Calloway, and I just copy paste these into the actual document and run through that. And this really takes the pain out of doing the EDI mapping, especially if you're doing a large library of EDI documents. The structures in EDI do repeat themselves, so if you've got queries to extract from a name and address loop, it's not only the invoice schema that you can use it. Probably all of the Edifact documents will have a very, very similar structure, and once you know how these queries work, you can reuse them a lot in other documents. Okay, to wrap this up, summary, consider using Custom XSLT where appropriate. Sometimes the mapper is the best option. I've heard some developers who really dismiss the mapper and just want to write Custom XSLT for everything. I'd say that's not a great option, as quite a lot of BizTalk developers will want to see the mapper and work with it. So very often the mapper can be a good option. Other times Custom XSLT is more optimal. You'll probably find out if you've been sort of sat around working on a map for sort of a considerable period of time and you start to get nowhere. Just go get a cup of coffee, come back, start with a clean map and start looking at Custom XSLT as an alternative, and you may find that does work out better. If you don't know XSLT, don't panic. You've seen through sort of running through my demos, I'm not too experienced with XSLT. The validating map will give you template XSLT, so you can read through that and see how it works. Visual Studio 2005 really makes life easy for learning XSLT. A couple of cool features. We've got great IntelliSense for XSLT, and that will give you the XSLT commands as well as the target schema. And then we've got the XSLT debugging, so when you're working with these complex queries, it's so easy to just snap on the debugger and just go in and work with your paths in the watch window.